And this is History's Worst Olympic Marathon in a Nutshell by the channel BlueJay. In today's lesson, we take a stroll down the memory lane of the 1904 St. Louis Olympic Marathon. Okay, what was probably the most horrifying race in history, the entire Olympic event was essentially a sideshow that was doomed from the start. From rat poison performance and also to human experimentation. I mean, it's start of the 20th century, 1904, right? Yeah. So Einstein still hasn't posted, I guess, special relativity. I'm pretty sure it was 1904, 1905, something like that. But yeah, so it's that time, right? Einstein is nobody at this point, I guess. I mean, he has posted some, good papers in there, but not the main thing. All right, so that's what it's one. Remember, flag my and open subscribe, so I know which type of videos to react to more. I love this kind of videos, right? Some shenanigans here and there. I think 3 channels I can think of that does shit like this. Obviously, Salmonella, that's his whole thing. This is Salmonella, like BlueJay, which is also great, right? And I think OSP's hijinks type of videos that OSP does sometime with the history and things. But yeah, let's do this one.
2,800 years to ancient Greece, the Olympics have become the pinnacle of athletic achievement, with the awarding of a gold medal being seen as internationally equivalent to winning a Nobel Prize, Pulitzer Prize, or my parents' approval. The world's best from all walks of life.
Alright, wait a minute, why is the audio so low?
Meet to prove their excellence in humanity's greatest cities. Athens, Paris, St. Louis. Yep, the third Olympic Games and America's first outing as host took place in St. Louis in 1904, but early 20th century St. Louis doesn't quite have the sex appeal of Athens or Paris. So how does one spice it up a bit? That's right, rat poison, brandy, and human experimentation.
Well, America.
Originally, the 1904 Games were to be held in Chicago, but that same year, the World's Fair was celebrating the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase in St. Louis. What would be the world's largest fair to date had fascinating exhibits like the first ever X-ray machine, the radio phone, and all your favorite different looking people on display. Remember kids, you can't have a fair without a healthy dose of racial superiority. Even with indigenous mud throwing contests being the crowd drawers they are, they didn't want to have to compete for spectators. So they threatened to overshadow the Olympics with their own sporting events, and successfully moved the Olympics to St. Louis.
Seriously, man, if you go back decades by decades, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you will always find something that in today's stand-up, people lose their mind. Like, how could you do this? This is, insensitive and shit like that. And it's consistent. That's the problem. It's not like, oh, that was 100 years ago, that was 50 years ago, where a specific point. So every few decades, it just, gets stronger and stronger, which means every decade, you will come across something that will feel insensitive, right? So today, there is many things that even we can't process insensitive in 2040s or something. People are like, what the fuck were they doing there?
Debacle in the clusterfuck that was the 1904 Olympics was the issue of location. With them lazy right boys not having double-decker Boeing 747s out yet, for foreign athletes, getting to St. Louis involved a lengthy boat trip, followed by a 1,000-mile train ride. Combined with the fact that the Russians and Japanese were having a disagreement at the time, a measly 12 nations showed up, with only 62 of the 651 athletes hailing from outside of North America. But the eye of the storm centered on the iconic marathon event. The 1904 Olympic Marathon was more freak show than showpiece, ironically more fitting for the fair-like atmosphere than a prestigious sporting event. Instead of the typical morning start time, this one was held in the afternoon, where temperatures soared to 92 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity in the 90s. This means the race took place with a heat index of a scorching 130.
Did you just say humidity of 90? Oh, that's just some bullshit. I live in India. I know what humidity is, right? The temperatures that I have right now, right? If the temperature touches 40 degrees Celsius, even close to that, I'll lose my mind. Even though I'm pretty sure if I go to some place that is dry, humidity is not high, and even if I walk around 40, I'll be fine. Humidity is a real, fucked up thing. Temperatures, you can take it at certain point, but if there's a big humidity, that's it.
35 degrees Fahrenheit. For context, ideal marathon conditions are around 41 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like replacing your CPU cooler with a tungsten arc welding torch. Only 32 runners from 4 nations participated in the race. A few were experienced runners having won or placed in past marathons, but the majority were misfits. Of these misfits, we have 2 South African Tswana tribesmen visiting St. Louis for a certain World's Fair exhibit, who ran the race barefoot. 10 Greeks who had never run a marathon a day in their lives.
What?
And Cuban national Felix Carbajal, a former mailman who demonstrated his running skills throughout Cuba to raise money. He was even reported to have ran the entire span of the island. Once he raised enough, he bought passage to the US and arrived in New Orleans. What's this quaint little contest? Dice. 1 in. Oh, well, I suppose I could spare $1 or 2.
Dame los dados.
Upon arrival, Felix lost all of his money on a game of dice, forcing him to hitchhike and walk his remaining journey to St. Louis. Felix approached the starting line in a long-sleeve shirt, long dark pants, street shoes, and, naturally, a beret. Hey, when you're 5 feet tall and amongst marathoners and all their short shorts, thigh glistening glory, you have to stand out somehow. A fellow Olympian felt bad and offered him scissors to cut his pants, making him some improvised shorts that bring a smile to any redneck's face.
Oh, this is Olympics? Come on, man.
The runners embarked on a course that one official called, quote, the most difficult a human being was ever asked to run over. The track consisted entirely of dirt roads and fractured stone, providing difficult footing, with 7 hills ranging from 100 to 300 foot verticals and long ascents. Running on public roads also made the race somewhat of a game of Frogger, with runners having to dodge trains, wagons, streetcars, and dog walkers.
Get out of
The
here.
air was safe, with cars driving alongside the runners, kicking up dust for them to inhale. Uphill running.
How is this Olympics, man? I get it, it's 1904, but still, like, holy shit. Seriously, just 100 years ago, all the things we see, like, how is this even possible? Are there any regulation? Are there any safety? Nah, man. Look at that. It's just like some townsfolk got together and said, we're going to host Olympics. And there you go. We're not going to prepare for anything. I guess we'll take this road. There are going to be cars there, horse carriages. Yeah, you can run in this humidity and the heat.
Dusty mouth, scorching heat. I could really go for some water.
What? Water? What are you, a pussy?
Meet James Sullivan, chief organizer of the Olympic Games. One day, James pondered a question we all have from time to time. What would happen if I forcibly dehydrated someone? To study the effects of purposeful dehydration, James decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, planning a marathon with only a single water station on the course. A dirty well, 11 miles in. That gave you dysentery. At the start of the race, Fred Lorse took the lead with Thomas
that's
Hicks
just
passing him
bullshit
shortly
right
after.
there.
One of the
How is that
barefoot
even
South
allowed?
Africans was chased a mile off course by wild dogs. John Lorden began vomiting profusely and gave up. William Garcia was found collapsed and on the brink of death after coughing up blood in the middle of the track, hemorrhaging with a ripped stomach lining and dust-lined esophagus. Interesting. Meanwhile, Felix was actually making good time, despite pausing to talk to...
See, people, I don't want government in my shit. This shit happens, right? I get it. You want free world and everybody wants that, but there's a line you have to be at. Too free is this, even worse than this. This is some bullshit. It's like, fuck it, I'm gonna do a human experiment because why not?
Spectator along the track. During the race, Felix casually remembered he hadn't eaten in the past 40 hours. He then saw people in a car with some peaches and asked for one, to which they said no. Hey, the fuck! Later on in the race, he stumbled upon an orchard and ate some apples, which then turned out to be rotten. He then started cramping and vomiting, so he decided to lay down and take a nap. Despite all odds and setbacks, Felix would actually go on to finish 4th. 9 miles in, Fred Lorse called it quits after cramping up, hitching a ride to the finish line and waving at bystanders and runners as he passed. Thomas Hicks started to show signs of extreme exhaustion 10 miles in, and begged his coach...
What I don't understand is this level of irregulated crap is going on. Why not somebody just sneak in with the vehicle, before anybody see it, just take the vehicle all the way to near finish and just walk past. Like, who's gonna know? I mean, are you saying people are keeping track at this point? Fuck that.
Water. But his coach, believing the only people who ever needed water were Aquaman and pussies, settled for sponging his mouth out with some warm distilled water. Hicks really started to break down 7 miles from the finish, which is where Dr. Charles Lucas sprung into action, giving him a mixture of strychnine and egg whites. Some call it a performance enhancer, some call it rat poison. I say it's 1904, so what's the difference? Keep in mind, early 20th century doctors were little more than licensed murderers. The car Fred Lorse was in broke down 19 miles in. Having recovered from his cramps, he decided to pull a sneaky and rejoin the race, passing doped-up Hicks and later the finish line in first place. Those at the stadium didn't know about Fred's disqualification, so they hailed him as the winner, and Fred played along. It even went so far that Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, took a picture with him and placed a wreath over his head. She was lower...
Alright, you know what? Yeah, I just said, why not somebody do it? And of course somebody did. Why wouldn't they? Why the fuck wouldn't they? And seriously, what is this rat poison, all this crap? I guess 1904, this is not the time where No experimentation on human thing kicked in yet, right? Human rights can go fuck itself. That's it. I mean, 1904 is not 1804. I get it, it's 100 years ago, but still, what the fuck, man? Like, doctors can do this shit, like, oh, in name of science, right? Okay, so I guess his rights can go fuck itself, I guess, in name of science. This is horrible, man.
She was lowering the gold medal over his neck when a spectator stepped in. Hey, yeah, that guy was disqualified.
You're fucking disgraceful. Captain Skinny Dip before
Okay, so I may have made that part up. I have an imagination. Sue me. The cheers turned to boos as Fred tried to play it off as a joke, claiming
That's
that
the
he
far
never
off, though.
intended to go through with it. Meanwhile, Hicks, who had lost motivation when Fred passed him, painfully picked up his pace after hearing of his disqualification. However, recently poisoned Hicks started to turn gray and limp, so they dosed him again with strychnine and egg whites. So you know how when you're watching the Olympics and think to yourself, these sports have a serious lack of alcoholism? Well, Hicks' team thought so too, so they washed the lethal drug down with some brandy. Why drink water when you can have ethanol? Hicks started running mechanically, like a well-oiled machine. His face sunk, his eyes grew dim, his palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. 20 miles in, Hicks started hallucinating, firmly believing he had another 20 miles to go. He begged his team for something to eat, but they just gave him more brandy instead.
Come on,
Poisoned
man.
and shit-faced. Just like my 2 a.m. Taco Bell runs, Thomas Hicks swinged and shuffled his way over the final
So his
stretch.
body's probably, dismantling from inside, but just because alcohol is pouring in, the pain is not as much as would have been. Alcohol is a really dangerous thing. That's why lots of medicine has a big marker there. Do not drink this with alcohol. Because alcohol will mask lots of things. Lots of pain, lots of sensors. Anything that fucks with your brain and your brain sensory department is a no-no. That's why you can't take lots of medicine with alcohol. And they just pop in alcohol after alcohol. Of course, he's drunk as fuck. He won't feel anything until he dies or collapses and dies there.
Stretch, with his trainers carrying him across the finish line, where he received the gold medal. Only 14 of the original 32 runners finished the race, the worst finish ratio in Olympic history. Here's a graph of gold medal marathon times throughout history. And here's Hicks' time, a full 29 minutes and 8 seconds slower than the second longest winning time in history, and almost 45 minutes longer than the slowest finisher in the 2016 Olympic marathon. It took 1 hour and 4 doctors for Hicks to feel well enough to just even leave the stadium, having lost 8 pounds over the course of the race.
He's gonna die.
So if Sullivan's experiment taught us anything, it's one hell of a weight loss program. So, in conclusion,
How much did he live after that? A year, month, few months? Because shit like that damage you from inside. Your body will start to go on, but you're gonna die. Somebody comment down if you know how much he lived after that. That's just horrible shit. And what happened to the doctors? I guess it's like 1904. Who gives a fuck? Is that it? See, this is the shit I get pissed off about. Every time there are certain people like, I want freedom for everything. I want no government intervention. And I understand where you're coming from. Governments are incompetent fucks, but that's the only thing you have. Regulations are the only thing you have. There's a limit. Obviously, too much regulation is also annoying, but there's a limit you have to keep. If you just remove everything, worse than this shit happens. I mean, this is just horrible. This is 1904, not 1804. 100 years ago, it's not that long ago, man. This is fucked up. I mean, how many centuries been, Olympics, wars, and seeing the history, how it's worked, how science advanced in past 200-300 years. 1904 is not the place I would think, like, okay, this kind of inhuman shit happened. I would have thought like 1800s or something, but no, it's 1904.
1904 Olympic Marathon featured the first 2 black Olympic athletes and a BlueJay approved amount of alcohol. It also resulted in multiple near fatalities and resembled less of an expertly organized event and more of an Ed, Edd and Eddy scheme. 2 out of 10 stars.
Damn, though. This was a wild ride, man. I love this channel. Every account is fucking ridiculous. Right, well, that was history's worst Olympic marathon in a nutshell by BlueJay. Obviously, there's a reason why there are like few 8 or 10 videos on his channel, and he's been uploading for 2+ years. So it takes time to go through all this history, finding out of all the history he can find, he has to specifically find ridiculous one, and then he has to make a video. That's just great. Alright, well, if you like my reason, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.